This episode is brought to you by Nature's Bounty. Nature's Bounty believes your body is brilliant, naturally designed to thrive, inside and out. For those always looking for new ways to support your health from head to heels, Nature's Bounty has a range of over 400 vitamins and supplements born from 50 years of trust and care. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Visit naturesbounty.com to learn more.
Every who down in Who Newville liked the holidays a ton, but where to get great prices on gifts, they had no idea. None. They searched and they searched for great gifts under $25. Gifts for spouses and friends and even their toddlers. When suddenly one who shouted, Walmart has what you want, knowing they have Lego, Tree Hut, and low prices to flaunt. So they enjoy the holiday season as Who's often do. Cheering and shouting, Walmart has incredible gifts. Who knew? Find gifts they'll love under $25 at Walmart.
Hi, Nat Doig here. Just a heads up that today's episode does include mentions of suicide. Welcome to Weird in the Wade, a podcast about all that's weird, wonderful, and a little off-kilter in the town of Biggleswade in Bedfordshire and its surrounding area. If you like your history with a pinch of the paranormal and your supernatural stories with some historical context, then this is the podcast for you. Whether it's the tale of the Potton Road poltergeist or discovering what's haunting Andy's house, grab a cuppa, sit back, and let me take you on a journey into the weird. It's 1835, Ampthill, an ancient town built on the Green Sand Ridge in Bedfordshire, a town enclosed by woodland, a once royal hunting park, and farmland, mostly owned by the Duke of Bedford. It is night, and a fine drizzle is petering out. Joseph Wotton is waiting. He's on the western edge of Ampthill, just south of the Great Park, where a great cross to Queen Catherine of Aragon stands. He is waiting at the foot of Cooper's Hill, though the locals generally call it the Firs. It's a modest hill, sandy, planted with deep green fir trees. To its southeast is a stately avenue of lime trees, known as the Almeida. It's Spanish for avenue, or so Joseph has been told. Joseph Wotton is a local gamekeeper. He would not normally be waiting so close to town. Poaching this near to the houses and inns is only attempted by youngsters, the very desperate, or stupid. But there has been a warren at Cooper's Hill for as long as anyone can remember. It is a place where rabbits can be snared, a practice the Duke will not tolerate. Well, his steward, who Joseph reports to, certainly won't. Snares were found at the Firs earlier in the day, so it is Joseph's job to wait and see who returns to them. He has an idea of who it might be, and he thinks it's just lads. Stupid lads. Not even desperate lads. But he must wait and catch them red-handed. As Joseph waits below the fir trees, the trickle of raindrops filtering through the branches make a kind of music. He is grateful for the firs' scent. Their deep, green smell is said to heal the sick. His lungs fill with the cold, astringent air, keeping him awake. Nothing stirs but the dripping from the branches above him. Even the owl has ceased its cries. No foxes slink by. No poachers either. Joseph wonders if the poaching lads have been tipped off. He was very careful to enter the firs without being seen. He can see where the snares are set in the clearing. The open space is glistening with rain. The moon must be emerging, Joseph thinks, but its light does not reach him in his hiding place amongst the shadows beneath the trees. The waiting gnaws at him, but Joseph is grateful for one thing, that this is just lads who are snaring, and that Ampthill is not plagued by the likes of James Clare, a Woburn poacher who was convicted 34 times for poaching. Yes, 34 times. The old codger was desperate for sure. A widower, a bag of arthritic bones he was. For decades he plundered the lands around Woburn, and some suspected Ampthill as well. Only he'd get himself caught every winter just so that he could spend a 3-month stint in Bedford jail during the worst of the weather. He even called it his townhouse, the old rogue. Wintering in prison with regular meals was more hospitable than staying in his shack of a house. Now, he died last year in his townhouse in Bedford, but he wasn't in that time for poaching. Oh no, the old devil had slashed at a workhouse mistress over an extra portion of stew. There are plenty more poachers like old Claire to take his place now that he's shuffled off his mortal coil, but Joseph is sure that these snares found here were left by youngsters, cheeky youngsters, but not hardened poachers. Which reminds him of a brag he'd heard tell that old bony Claire had claimed in court, to the Duke of Bedford's face. Claire said that the hares and rabbits that he was found with were surely his, because all his hares wore a collar of metal around their necks, whilst the Duke's hares had none. Joseph admires the old poacher's cheek, but he's glad the old devil is no longer plundering the game belonging to the Duke. Something then catches Joseph's attention, a shift in the light. Is it just moonlight? The clouds are thinning, and he can see more now around him. The wet ferns and bracken shimmer in the cold light, but that isn't it. There's something else happening. It's like some of the trees are fading away. He reaches out a hand to steady himself against the nearest tree. It is solid. It is still here. But others ahead of him are faded. He can see through them. He shakes his head to get some sense into it. Was he drifting off to sleep on his feet? No, he feels awake, and there is something else occurring. As some of the trees fade, more light pours through to reach him, and it's an orange glow coming from the direction of town. Is it fire? It does not flicker, and it is constant. He has never seen anything like it. It bathes the clouds that remain at the edges of the sky in an uncanny shade of orange, a sickening shade, like nothing Joseph has ever seen in nature. The world around him spins, it seems. He is seasick, on dry land. He looks down and away from the horizon and that rust-stained sky. He stares at his boots. He wraps his coat around him. It's a thick greatcoat, his father's from the war with Napoleon. It's warm. He breathes in its familiar smell of damp wool and thyme. He is safe and secure, he tells himself. Joseph looks up towards the clearing where the snares are set. But he is not safe. Something is very, very wrong out there. The clearing is transformed, and Joseph can't understand what it is that he is seeing at first. He is lightheaded and empty, as if all the air in his lungs has been sucked away. His mouth agape. He cannot reckon with what he is seeing. More trees have faded, and in their place is a more open field, which has some kind of encampment on it. Tents of bright colours, slick with rain in the moonlight, squat in the field, though there is something about them that shimmers more than just raindrops, like they're made of silk. But how can they be? What is happening to me? Joseph thinks. If you'd asked Joseph how he would react to seeing a ghost, for example, he would have assured you that he would confront it. He did not believe in such things. He would certainly fight if he was set upon by poachers. He would attack if a wild animal charged at him. He is a man of action. Yet now confronted with his reality fading into something that he cannot fathom, he freezes. He can't even form thoughts in his mind because it is swimming. Afterwards, many thoughts will go through his mind. Was this a vision of heaven or hell? But he has never been devout. He is a good Christian, but not the sort who has visions. Was it insanity? His uncle had begun to see shadows and shapes of things that weren't there in his dotage. But Joseph is young. Was he feverish? Was this a delirium? But none of this goes through his head at the time as he looks upon this scene, bathed in that strange rusty orange light. The tents squatting close to each other, And then he notices that bright lights are flickering along the road in the distance that leads into Ampthill. He should run or investigate, but all he can do is pace. He starts pacing through the trees, backwards and forwards, and he is thankful that these trees remain in front of him and haven't vanished like the others. He is pacing backwards and forwards, a sickness of dread building from his gut, rising to his stomach and his throat, to the bones in his face. As he paces, he glances at the awful scene of the camp and its sick orange light. He tells himself that it's not there. It's not real, Joseph. It's not there. It's not real, Joseph. It's not real. Then he sees a light flash, a very bright, clear light, not a flame, something brighter and steady. And he realises that the light was being held in the hand of a man who is walking towards him, a strange man in odd clothing, holding that uncanny light at his side. The throbbing dizziness in Joseph's head explodes, like he is being split in two. Joseph lets out a scream so terrifying that he will never, ever forget it. He'll hear his own terror reflected back in him in nightmares until his dying day. But as soon as that sound is released from somewhere deep inside him, he is once again folded into the darkness and stillness of the firs. All of the trees are solid again. The ground where the snares had been set is as it should be. There is no camp, no weird rusty glow, and the owl has again begun to hoot. Joseph did not tell a soul of what he saw that night, and no one would understand it or him. In his old age, he began to wonder if it had been a vision into hell, but he knew in his bones that that wasn't right. They never caught or gained proof as to who had set the snares. The lads certainly never came back to them, and Joseph wasn't surprised. He often wondered if maybe these poachers had seen more than they had bargained for at Cooper's Hill as well. Hello and welcome to Weird in the Wade. I'm Nat Doig, and today we're taking a stroll up Cooper's Hill at Ampthill. Now, the story I opened the show with is completely fictional, to a point. I have imagined a gamekeeper called Joseph. I have imagined him being confronted by this strange sight as a way to possibly imaginatively explain a real sighting that happened at Cooper's Hill in the 1980s. And don't worry, it will make more sense later on in the show. I'm going to be joined by two guests. Nick, who experienced something uncanny in the 1980s at Cooper's Hill, and also Brian Bland, who runs Ampthill Ghost Walks. In trying to find out what Nick's experience could have been, Brian and I uncover some startling recent history linking the two world wars and the Cold War to Cooper's Hill. Expect secret bunkers, Canadian lumberjacks, and yes, some poaching. The part of the introduction that I didn't make up was about the poacher James Clare. He was a real-life poacher from Woburn, just west of Ampthill. He was convicted 34 times for poaching, and everything that I told you about him was true. You can find out more about him and links to further reading for the show on our blog, weirdinthewade.blog. Ampthill. Before we meet Nick, just a little bit about the town of Ampthill. It's one of Bedfordshire's ancient towns, though at the time of the Domesday Book in 1086, it was actually one of the county's smallest settlements. Owned by Nigel de Albany at the time, it only had 9 households, but by 1219, Ampthill had grown and is prospering as it's awarded its charter market. A castle is built in the 15th century and is inherited by Henry VIII, who may have visited and hunted in the Great Park at Ampthill. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, certainly did visit, as she was confined at Ampthill Castle when she received the devastating news that Henry was divorcing her. And in the late 18th century, a beautiful cross was erected to commemorate this incident. The inscription expresses a very 18th century view, saying that although Catherine's suffering was great, the county benefited from Henry's lurch into Protestantism. I think we can all agree that history and the present day would be very different if the Reformation hadn't happened, but I'm not sure if it would be better or worse. The castle fell into disrepair, but the town of Ampthill became a genteel place in the late 18th and early 19th century. The Gentleman magazine comments in 1849 that 30 years ago, Ampthill was perhaps reckoned the genteelest town in the county, as I have been told that Potton, now a humble place, was before it. But it has not now the distinctive character. Many respected and popular inhabitants are no more. It was still a popular, if not genteel, coaching and then railway town in the later 19th century. But I'll leave the 20th century history until later. So let's hear from Nick, who contacted me over a year ago with his story, and it is a chilling story at that. On meeting Nick over Zoom, he struck me as a sensible man with somewhat of a military bearing. He wore a checked shirt and large framed glasses, and he had a warm smile. So let's dive right in and hear Nick's story.
I was on an attachment from the Territorial Army and was taking part in a cadet weekend about 1984, 1983. It could have been anywhere between 83 and 86, I think, but more likely 83 or 84. The plan was that everyone was going to be quiet and in their tents asleep until the following morning. So this was a Saturday night. It was about this time of year, late August, early September, as far as I recall. It had been raining, but the weather had cleared up. There was a lot of moonlight. It was a really lovely night, and I was just sort of sat there enjoying sitting in the darkness, watching the night go by. We were at the bottom, as far as I recall, so the land was just beginning to rise up. It was open woodland. It had been raining, as I said, but the ground was wet, and you could see a lot of light reflecting off the wet ground and off the wet trees. And the trees, as far as I recall, were quite open at that point, so you could see quite a distance, and the moonlight was coming through the trees, so the visibility was good. And all of a sudden I got called over by one of the sentries and said, "There's someone over there, there's a man walking about." So I knew that wasn't supposed to be happening in terms of our activities, so I just thought, it's a member of the public out for a stroll. So as I wandered over, he pointed, and I saw this figure walking between the trees some distance away, but quite clearly, it was a tall man walking, as far as I could tell, purposefully. Mm-hmm. What stuck in my mind was that he was wearing one of those old-fashioned greatcoats, the ones, the sort of the very long ones that swirl about as you walk. And he walked behind a tree and then didn't come out the other side. Mm-hmm. So I said to the bloke, well, I'll just wander over and, let him know that we're here so he doesn't get a fright. Yeah. And so I walked the 20 yards or so, clearly in, where I knew where I was going. I could see the tree that I was heading towards. And when I got there, to my surprise, I expected to find him sort of standing behind the tree or leaning against the tree or something, but there was no one there. Yeah. So I thought, okay, I've got the wrong tree. So I sort of wandered to the next tree and had a look. No, there was no one behind that tree, and so on. And after about a minute or so of looking behind trees, I began to feel slightly silly. So I walked back and said to him, "Where did he go?" Yeah. And he said, "Well, he never came out." He said, "He's still behind there, isn't he?" So I said, "Well, no, there was no one there." Yeah. And that really was about it. I thought it was a very strange experience. I did go back and have another look just to make sure, but never found him. And as far as we could tell, because I was being watched, the man never moved away from the spot where we'd both seen him disappear behind. So anyway, the following morning, I was, sort of slightly perplexed as to what had happened. It didn't occur to me that it was anything, unusual in the sense of paranormal or anything like that. But I happened to mention it to someone who was from Ampthill, and he told me that there was a story about this man who had very sadly hanged himself at the top of the hill, but had been walking backwards and forwards prior to doing that. Because if I recall the story correctly, there was a pipe or it wouldn't be a lamppost, but there was a post or a pipe at the top of the hill, and this was where this poor man had hanged himself. The other part of the story, the reason it was explained to me that this figure was walking up and down, was that he'd been banging on a window or a door at a house at the bottom, and they'd not been in or ignored him or something like that. He then walked up the hill, and this was apparently a sighting of him walking up the hill. And I wasn't sure whether to believe him or, but he didn't strike me. I didn't know him particularly well, but he didn't strike me as the sort of person who'd pull my leg.
No.
And it seemed to be quite a lot of detail in the story and things like that he went through. And so, for the last 40 some years, it's stuck in my mind as a very strange experience that I can't explain.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I love Nick's story. The fact that he has great recall of it and he was not the only witness all lend to its credibility. It's certainly atmospheric too, with the raindrop-laden trees and vegetation sparkling in the cold moonlight, making everything seem brighter than it should be. What did Nick and his companion see that night? Just a chap walking his dog? Or going for a walk in the woods? It seems unlikely at that hour, and no dog was seen or heard. And how could a figure just disappear? As I began to investigate this story, I discovered that both supernatural and sceptical explanations were equally compelling. Was the pacing man the ghost of a tragic suicide victim, or a glimpse of a Canadian military woodsman from the past? Or was it an actual very alive military man who spent time secretly cloistered in a bunker within the hill, just outstretching his legs? I don't know which explanation is more thrilling, but I can say that the story of a man who tragically took his own life on the hill seems unlikely. Both Bryan and I have found no evidence for anything like it happening at the Firs. And just to explain here, Brian Bland, who I'm going to talk with later, runs Ampthill Ghost Tours, and he is a local historian. So I would expect Brian to know of any stories, and I did search the newspaper archives and found nothing relating to a suicide at Cooper's Hill or even any tragic deaths. I spent a very sad afternoon reading through those tragic deaths at Ampthill over the last 200 years, and I found nothing that matches the tale told to Nick. But I have heard similar stories told around the campfires or on dark, spooky nights as urban legends from all over the country. And talking of Brian, let's head over to Cooper's Hill and let Brian tell us some more about its history in the 20th century, which could shed light on Nick's extraordinary story. At the end of the summer, I met Brian in Ampthill, and we walked around the site at Cooper's Hill, exploring the landscape, and Brian told me some of the hill's history. I'm going to start with the bunker because I think it is fascinating, and it is the last place you would expect to find a bunker of any kind. The ground is sandy, there is beautiful purple heather, there are beautiful trees, the sun was setting, and actually below us we could hear the rugby players practicing. So every now and again you may hear the sound of rugby being played in the background.
Shift. As we stand here, when Nick was here with the cadets, the hill in front of us would have been surrounded by a chain link fence with barbed wire on top of it, with concrete posts around it.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have been able to see the bunker at all.
No.
Because it's on top of the hill, underneath the steel door. It's likely it had some signs, so a mast for broadcast, because the bunker was linked to other ROC, Royal Observatory Corps posts around the country, particularly its main station in Biddenham near Bedford. So if you stood here, you'd see a fence, yeah?
Yeah.
But not a lot more.
No.
Let's make our way up the hill.
It's really sandy.
Yeah. From a geological point of view, we're on the Green Sand Ridge, which
Yeah.
stretches all the way across Bedfordshire. And that's quite interesting in its own right, because that goes all the way from Leighton Buzzard to Gambling Gate. And there are many theories about the ley lines and energy that the Greensand Ridge has in Bedfordshire.
Well, we have noticed that many of the stories that I've covered tie in with the Greensand Ridge, whether it's Clop Hill, Cockayne Hatley, and Pottonwood. Yeah,
they're all on the ridge. Yeah, they're all on the ridge, or around the ridge, or sited around the ridge. So I've been walking my dog around here for years, and this area now is, it's nature restoration. It's heather. It's beautiful purple heather that we're seeing in flower right now, and the dog loves to go in amongst the heather and run around. But there are still some signs of concrete posts in this area that sometimes you stumble across if you're trying to retrieve your dog. But it's hard to imagine, actually, this is a military site now. We've stood here this evening, guys are practicing the rugby, joggers are running by, getting their exercise, people are walking their dogs, and that's Cooper Hill now, right? It is a place for leisure, it's a place for exercise, and it's a place really to walk your dog. It links nicely from the town to Ampthill Park, so people use it in that way. But they don't think of it as a military site, which it was, and it has been, particularly throughout the 20th century. So we're approaching the top of the hill, and you can see the signs immediately of the bunker here, with this big concrete cap that's now on it.
Oh wow, yeah. And we'll put photographs of this on the show blog, on weirdintheway.blog.
This is very recent, so what we're seeing now is this poured concrete with this welded shut steel door. Now this was done in the early 90s, and you can see it's a significant amount of poured concrete, and it's not a very tidy job, and that's because when the bunker closed, it was closed and the fence was taken down, and some school kids actually managed to prise it open, descend the ladder and find out what was down there. After they'd done that, it was open for the rest of the summer holidays, and loads of kids went down there, including some who, of course, set fire to what was down there, which was a terrible shame. And that meant that it's been closed ever since. So there, apparently, either the council or the Royal Observatory Corps poured this concrete and welded it shut properly. So nobody's been down here now since about the early 90s for 30 years. So what was here? The bunker that was here was 2 rooms. One large room with a pair of bunks and a desk and a communication post, and also monitoring equipment for air quality and particularly radioactivity, and a very small room that had a chemical toilet in it. Imagine that, being cooped up here with another serviceman monitoring if there was a nuclear attack. So we've got to think about the history of the Cold War here. These bunkers were built all the way across the UK in the 60s at the threat of nuclear attack from the Soviet Union, right? And they were an important strategic placement to monitor what would happen in the event of a nuclear strike. And Central Beds would have been decimated. Chicksands was a US Air Force base. It would have been a prime target for the Soviet Union to wipe out that comms base, and Central Beds would have been completely obliterated as a result of that nuclear attack. And these were in place from the early 60s until 1991. That's when this closed, and that was the same with all of them when the Cold War was deemed to be over.
But when Nick was here, he did not know that this existed. So were they secret?
They were secret, absolutely, yeah. So they were secret emplacements where the people that worked in them wouldn't talk about their mission, they wouldn't talk about what they were doing. They would be underground on shifts for so many days, and then they would switch to another group of people. All people could see was the fence around it, but they wouldn't have known that under here was a bunker. And before that, and this people would have been able to see, but they probably would have been more accepting of it, was what was called an Olie post. Now, an Olie post was related to the Second World War, and it was named after Messrs Olie and Co, who made concrete reinforced buildings. They made these small concrete structures that look similar to a pillbox, a gun emplacement, and this in the World War II was looking out for aeroplanes going over to Elstow Storage Depot where they made bombs, or over to Shortstown where there was a Spitfire engine and parts factory, or just over to the important train line linking both Bedford and the Rolls-Royce and Allen Engineering, and there was a lot going on through Elstow Storage Depot down through London and to Portsmouth and the docks. So this was an important post in the Second World War, and people would have been aware of it being a post for the war effort. But then that was removed, and the Cold War denoted these bunkers.
The history of the Royal Observer Corps is fascinating and older than you might think. The Corps were formed in 1925 as a branch of the RAF to monitor aircraft over UK skies. But the idea was far older. The Royal Observer Corps Heritage website points out that the use of beacons on hilltops to spread news and alert communities had been used from at least the Roman times. These beacons played an important role in the campaign against the Spanish Armada in Tudor times as well. The principle of beacons was adapted in 1925 using telephone wires and strategically placed and linked observer stations. And it's strange to think that we had aeroplanes for years before we had radar. The only way to track aircraft was visually. So if you wanted to keep track of who was flying above the country, Royal Observer Corps or ROC model was an excellent one. But the ROC came into their own during the Second World War. All-lit posts were built across the UK with the express purpose of monitoring UK skies during wartime. Their role was crucial, and many of the posts were managed and run by volunteers, including many women. There's a great video on YouTube that I will link to on the show blog, weirdinthewade.blog, about an ROC post at Braemar in Scotland. One of the women volunteers talks about her role during World War II in that video. When I was researching this episode back in September, I also visited an exhibition at the Higgins Museum in Bedford, which, unbeknown to me, featured a painting of an ROC all-lit post painted by Eric Revilius in 1939, as he volunteered as an observer. Not long after this, he was appointed official war artist by the Navy. The painting of the observer post in Essex gives you an excellent idea of how Cooper's Hill ROC post may have looked during the Second World War. You can see the painting on the Weird in the Wade blog. The video I mentioned earlier from Braemar Media includes information from an RAF veteran about what it was like working in the bunkers during the Cold War. He explains that all personnel would carry a radioactivity monitor, a small thermometer-like instrument. If the reading became too high, you were too radioactive to continue your duties. The Braemar bunker is set out just as it would have been back in its use. There was a landline to the local HQ observer barracks. At Cooper's Hill, that would have been Biddenham. There was also a carrier receiver mounted onto the wall, which not only the bunkers had, but also hospitals and police stations. And these carrier receivers gave out a constant tick unless there was an imminent nuclear attack, when the alarm signal would sound. In the bunker, they also had hand-cranked sirens for alerting the population to an attack, or the all clear. The bunker also held lots of charging points for batteries, as their shifts were 8 hours long and battery power wasn't what it was today. They also had a very sturdy torch in the bunker as well, and I was pleased to see a kettle also on the shelf, as one of the very few comforts down there. And it's not surprising that these secret Cold War ROC bunkers and their larger cousins have attracted rumour, urban myth and ghost stories over the last 30 years. It tends to be the larger bunkers used as headquarters which attract most stories. There's Kelvedon Hatch in Essex, which boasts as being the biggest and deepest Cold War bunker in the southeast. Paranormal investigation groups have certainly visited Kelvedon, including Ciarán O'Keeffe, I believe. There are tales told of poltergeist activity and shadowy figures seen at some of these larger bunkers. I'm guessing your standard ROC bunker, like Cooper's Hill, are just too small and cramped for ghost hunts and investigations. But a larger one open in York has inspired a fictional ghost story. Mark Haddon, the author of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, was challenged by English Heritage to spend time in the bunker as inspiration for a ghost story in their collection, 8 Ghosts. Now, I've not read his story, Bunker, but it's on my list now of ghost stories to read. And what of Nick's ghost sighting at Cooper's Hill? Could it be connected to the Cold War bunker? I asked Bryan what his thoughts were on Nick's experience.
Dripping in gold? That's cool. Dripping in Velveeta's supremely creamy golden cheesiness? That's respect. Elevate your drip with Velveeta's range of outrageously delicious dips and dishes. Shells, cheese, melty blocks, and heat and eat queso that go all in on indulgence. Flex on your fam with a creamy, cheesy masterpiece and go all in on what you love with Velveeta. Respect the drip and satisfy your cravings. Bring home the drip with Velveeta.
No one should have to choose between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina is helping to create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters through the Purple Leash Project, so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit purina.com/purple to learn more.
So, what do you make of Nick's story?
I think it's fascinating. So the site's got a rich history, and whether the apparition was to do with a suicide or whether it was even older, I think it's really difficult to tell. But clearly what was seen, and as ever you can't refute that, particularly as it was seen by more than one person, and that's always interesting when you get a manifestation of this type. Was it a suicide here at Cooper's Hill? There's no historical record of a suicide here, but that's often an urban legend. It's often a story that's told that somebody was desperate and sadly ended their life, and then people see a spirit and relate it to that urban myth. Whether that's the case or whether it's a spirit relating to past history, then I don't know. But clearly Nick was here, he was here with cadets, they saw something, they were camping here. He wasn't aware of the connection with the bunker or its military connection at the time, which he wouldn't have been because it was a secret installation. The area's definitely got a nature about it, and you can imagine it how Nick describes it on that moonlit night. After the rainfall, the rain dripping off the leaves, and therefore the moonlight shimmering on the leaves and creating a certain atmosphere. And also, you've got to remember, these cadets and Nick were in a state of anticipation. They were playing a game with other cadets, so they were waiting for something to happen. There was a heightened anticipation. So if you think about it from a psychological point of view, what they experienced was real for them, but where were they? They were actually waiting for somebody. So was this imaginary? Was it some kind of a small scale psychosis? I don't know. But regardless, it's a great story. But my feeling is, if there is a ghost of Cooper's Hill, and there may well be, it might not be a modern suicide. It might be something else.
Sorry, have you got food? So,
Right, hi. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, small dog. Hello. What's that? I know. You might lose that. Hey, you're all right. You're okay. Don't worry. You're fine. Susie.
The dogs love these, and the cats.
Yeah,
too.
I bet. Oh, yeah. She's so sweet. No, please don't apologise. It's fine.
No. I always like it when the dogs come up and snuffle at the microphone. It's great noise.
After the very cute dog interruption, Bryan told me the story of the firs at Cooper's Hill, how the firs disappeared and what they were used for. There are a few fir trees now at Cooper's Hill, but nothing like there were before the First World War.
So when we get to the First World War, there is a call for timber to prop up the trenches in France and Belgium. And at this point, the Duke of Bedford allows public access, but he still owns the land, and Cooper's Hill is definitely a place where the people in the 1910s and 1920s came to relax. They came here for the fresh air, they came here to walk, just as they do today, walk the dog, probably a different kind of exercise. They weren't jogging around in the lycra we see today, but they were coming here to parade and with their parasols and for a Sunday stroll and stuff. So when it was suggested by the Board of Trade, the Timber Supplies Department in 1917, to cut down all of the firs that stood on Cooper's Hill, the town council and the town were in uproar. But the decision was made at a very high level by the War Office, and actually the Canadian Forestry Corps were moved in to cut down those trees.
So, just let me stop you there. Basically, Canadian lumberjacks, I'm guessing.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. There were 186 Canadian lumberjacks, who were basically Canadian foresters, and of course that was part of the Empire fighting the First World War. They moved here to Cooper's Hill and they had a camp here. And actually, the town council were in uproar, and they actually called a meeting and they called a representative of the forestry department to come and meet with them. But by the time he made the meeting, the trees were already cut down. Not only were they camped here, but about half a mile away was Ampthill Station. They created a timber yard at Ampthill Station and planked the wood up there and then sent it on the trains out off to the trenches. And that was really something. I've got a map here, which I'll show you in amongst all my records. Now this is a 1925 map.
Oh, wow.
Original map of Ampthill. Part of my big crazy collection, right? Now, Ampthill Park is here, opposite us.
Yeah, I see.
Okay, and here is Cooper's Hill.
Hang on, let me hold that for you.
And here is Cooper's Hill, shown in 1925. It's 6 years after the First World War has ended, and all of the trees are taken off it.
There's nothing there,
There's
is
nothing.
there?
We're sitting about here, at this high point here.
It's just sand. You can see that that's what that represents.
Absolutely.
It's like just sand.
Absolutely. All that is shown is a few trees by the road, which is now opposite where the coffee lodge is at Ampthill Park.
And the rugby club trees just down that road.
Absolutely.
And
the
that's
rugby
it.
club's in here. But it's completely shown as heathland.
Yeah.
All of the trees are gone. The only trees that do remain is the Alameda Avenue that was planted in the 1700s by Lord Ossory, which then later, the Avenue of Limes were called an Alameda because he did a classical tour, and Alameda's Spanish for avenue. He planted a few avenues of trees in Ampthill. There's others on the other side of the park. But this one was really important because after the First World War, it's where they put War Memorial.
Yeah.
Often people think that the First World War Memorial in Ampthill, they planted the avenue of trees because of the War Memorial. Actually, it was the other way around. They've already been here 200 years. But I find this fascinating because all the trees are gone in 1925.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
There's nothing there. The people of Ampthill did not want that to happen, and locally the area is less known as Cooper's Hill. Here in Ampthill it's known as the Firs, and it relates back to the fir trees being cut down. So even before the nuclear war observation bunker, it was related to the First World War.
Now, before I draw any conclusions as to what might be going on at Cooper's Hill, I wanted to play for you this beautiful song. If you remember Olie Campbell, who composed the song The Buryman for the Buryman episode earlier this year, well, he has composed this beautiful song about Cooper's Hill and about its connection to the First World War and those fir trees. I'm going to play it for you now, and then I'll be back with some conclusions.
Is the light of your day, howling wolf your company, when the shadows come out to play. Here is where we've come to be. Moon on the Warren whispers to me. This timber holds up the wall, and soldiers scream their litanies, will lay beneath the forest floor. For here is where we've come to be. Whispers to me.
are my first thoughts on Nick's sighting at Cooper's Hill. He clearly saw something, as there is another witness. Could it possibly have been an actual person walking that night? A member of the public is unlikely at that time. It was very late. And also, why would they just disappear? But it is the most logical explanation. So could it have been a member of the Royal Observer Corps? RAF wintercoats are greatcoats, and it seems there was a uniform for the volunteers. At first, I did think I was onto something with this suggestion that the person walking was ROC personnel. Could they have disappeared into the hill and into the bunker? Then I discovered that by the 1980s, the bunkers were only staffed during training and exercises. If the threat of nuclear war had increased, then volunteers would have been deployed permanently. But the bunker would not have been in use constantly at that time. If the cadets were on an exercise, though, could the ROC not have been also on one? Also, if this happened during the Falklands War, maybe the exercises and training were happening much more frequently, making it more likely that the bunker was in use. I even wondered if there might have been another entrance into the bunker lower down in the hill, which could account for the disappearance. But alas, that is not the case. There was only one way in or out of the ROC bunker at Cooper's Hill, just like the majority of all the other bunkers. But it's not impossible that the ghost was in fact an ROC volunteer, though their disappearance is really hard to explain. So what about if it is a ghost? Then of whom? We have First World War Canadian airmen based at Cooper's Hill, some of whom sadly will not have returned from the war to Canada. Could one of their restless spirits still wander the hill where they chopped down all those fir trees? Or could it be an older ghost, that of a poacher or gamekeeper? Or maybe, as I imagined, could it be a time slip, a glimpse into the past? Maybe one day science will explain why it is that sometimes we glimpse people or objects that appear out of time. I have one final theory, and it's about that story that Nick was told by a local to Ampthill about the tragic suicide and the ghost who walks the hill. Now, I wondered if it was one of those stories that we've come across before in Weird in the Wade, a ghost story put about to scare people away from a site. There would have been a telegraph or telephone pole at the top of Cooper's Hill, and that would have looked quite odd because it would have only been connected one way. Did that telegraph pole and chain link fence that was around the top of Cooper's Hill lend to creating scary stories about that area? And could those stories have been exploited by the ROC to keep people away? It's just a thought, but we've seen it before with ghost stories that have been created or concocted to keep people away from places where they are not wanted. One thing is for sure, the history of Cooper's Hill is rich and fascinating, as is that of the town of Ampthill, where Bryan leads his ghost walks. So I promise this is not the last time you'll be hearing about Ampthill. And actually, Ampthill in many ways is like a twin to Biggleswade. They're both of a similar size, they both are market towns, and they both service sort of, the railway, or before that, the roads travelling north. Ampthill was always a little bit more genteel, though, than Biggleswade. And finally, Olie Campbell didn't write just one song for this episode. He in fact wrote two. And this song, which I'm going to play for you now, ponders the time slip theory for what Nick glimpsed on that late summer's night. Stick around until after Ollie's beautiful song for a sneak preview of the next episode of Weird in the Wade.
The moonlight taking the place of the daylight, shadows that move in the dark night. Were they there before? On night watch, the silence it deafens, it takes hold. From nothing comes something and sounds come. Have you heard them before? And it pulls you in, and it takes you down and around the bend. The time slips, faces that don't seem familiar, laying beneath the birch trees. Were we here before? Creeping creatures beneath the old warren. The hunter becomes the hunted in the dead of night, and it pulls you in, and it takes you down and around the bend. And it pulls you in, and it takes you down and around the bend.
Before I play you the next episode's trailer, I did ask Bryan to tell me a little bit about his Ampthill Ghost Walks in case any of you are interested in booking on, and I can really, really recommend a ghost walk with Bryan. But let's hear what he had to say.
I've been passionate about Bedfordshire ghost stories for my entire life, and I've been collecting things, including old maps, old pictures, ghost stories and folklore for years, and I've always kind of wanted to do something with them. And I probably don't think I've got a novel in me, so I thought, okay, I'll do some ghost walks. So my ghost walks are about 2 hours long, well, maximum 2 hours, and around about a mile around Ampthill town centre, which is mainly Georgian but going right back to medieval times. We visit some of Ampthill's most haunted and horrific sites, so we cover a lot of haunted with a lot of ghost stories. And what's been fascinating is, since I started them a year ago in September 2024, is so many people have reached out and retold me stories that are recorded in books and newspapers, so they've brought them up to date, or they've reached out to me and told me new stories. So when people come on a ghost walk with me, they get the historical contents, but they often get what's happening now or what happened recently, and sometimes even people that they know or that they know of. So I try and make it as real as possible, because Ampthill has got a ghost story, particularly in the town centre, almost for every property. So we go from historic inns through to the courthouse, a haunted pizzeria, haunted hairdressers, right the way through to a haunted beauty therapists as well, and a haunted bank, and some fantastic old houses and their stories as well. And I touch on things like Ampthill Castle, which has got a great story as well. So yeah, we walk, and we every 10 minutes we do a ghost story, and it's really great to do them in the winter when it's dark. And I illustrate it using kind of a big portfolio of images and a laser pointer and that kind of stuff. But I'd love people to come along. Find me on Facebook, that's the easiest thing to do. Drop me a personal message or an email. All the details are on Facebook. So if you search Ampthill Ghost Walks, you'll find me. All of the upcoming dates are there, and usually they're every 2 weeks on a Wednesday evening. And I'd love to see people.
And if you visit weirdinthewade.blog, there is a link going straight to Bryan's Facebook page for Ampthill Ghost Walks. And as promised, here is a sneak preview of the next episode of Weird in the Wade. On the 8th of December, as a pre-Christmas treat, come with me to one of England's most haunted houses as we take a wander away from the Wade to Preston Manor in Brighton.
Let's go through here. Yes.
The two eyes, the nose and the grin, it could be like a little demon.
It could be like a little demon, yeah. Absolutely. And in this room, I think also someone saw a disembodied hand climbing the bedpost.
I did hear about a hand.
Yes. So they employed a medium to come and hold a séance at Preston Manor. The room steward on this floor heard a scream, came rushing in and said, "What's the matter?" And the boy said, "A man shouted at me." And he said, "What man?" He said, "A man shouted at me and said, 'You mustn't be in here, get out.'"
Thank you so much for listening to Weird in the Wade and this episode about Cooper's Hill. I'd really like to thank Nick, first of all, for sharing his experience with us. As he said, he doesn't talk about it often, and it clearly has lived with him for the last 40 years. I'm sorry we couldn't come up with a definitive answer as to what it was you saw, Nick. I'd also really like to send a huge thank you out to Brian Bland of Ampthill Ghost Walks for spending the time with me on Cooper's Hill, showing me around and telling us all about its history. Thank you so much, Brian. I'd also like to thank Olie Campbell for composing those 2 beautiful songs about Cooper's Hill, or inspired by Cooper's Hill. Thank you so much, Olie. And don't forget that if you want to listen to Weird in the Wade advert free, you can, if you're in the UK, listen on BBC Sounds, or anywhere else in the world or the UK, you can become a supporter of Weird in the Wade's Patreon. Just head over to Weird in the Wade Patreon and there's a link in the episode description. And for less than a cup of coffee a month, you can support Weird in the Wade to help keep it going, but also receive advert-free episodes and bonus episodes as well. There are, of course, other ways that you can support Weird in the Wade, and one of the best ways is to rate and review Weird in the Wade if your app of choice allows. By doing that, more people find Weird in the Wade. Another brilliant way to support Weird in the Wade is to follow the show on social media. We're everywhere: Blue Sky, Insta, Facebook, Threads, you name it. Twitter, we're there. So if you want to hear more from Weird in the Wade and you want to show your support, do get in touch on social media. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can always email me at weirdinthewade@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to Weird in the Wade. Weird in the Wade is researched, written, presented and produced by me, Nat Doig. Theme music is by Tess Savagir, and all additional music and sound effects are from Epidemic Sound.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here, wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. And Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day. Yeah? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hey there, I'm Susie and I'm the host of Beyond the Ferns podcast. Each week, I take you beyond the headlines into the stories that linger long after the news fades. From chilling true crime and unsolved cold cases to paranormal encounters, cults, and extraordinary survival stories. It's a little bit of everything for everyone. Whether you're drawn to mysteries, fascinated by the strange and unexplained, or simply love a good story, I focus on the truth, the details, and above all, justice for the victims and survivors. So buckle up, things are about to get a little scary. Follow Beyond the Ferns wherever you get your podcast. Thanks, y'all.